In the vast savannas of Tanzania, not even the sun dared to shine that morning. The sky had fallen like a heavy bullet and met the earth. The birds that normally sing at dawn were silent, the crickets had no melodies tearing the night, the wind seemed to have forgotten itself. Instead of whispering to the leaves, something was going very wrong, and in the middle of that endless, silent void, an old king was walking towards his death. Thurn. His very name was once a storm that he could move a herd of wildebeest with his eyes and silence the valleys with his roar. Now, his every step was an echo of collapse. His shoulders sagged, his mane darkened, his eyes fogged with the burden of distant memories, but still, it was a kingdom. The earth revered his presence, even the wind counted his steps, the heat squeezed his chest like a vice. His breathing became erratic, that it was hard to move forward. But Thurin's nature had never learned to give up. So he walked on, a little further, maybe a tree shade. Maybe a cool rock face, perhaps his own end. His eyes searched for a shadow on the cracked earth. And he found it, a dried but resilient acacia, its crooked branches reaching for the sky, like a friend of 1,000 years. It waited for the weary king. Thurin reached the shade, breathing heavily. He lay down in the coolness of the earth, and in that moment, he felt the world change, but it was too late. The earth trembled. It was not noticeable at first. It was so light, like a leaf falling. A breath, an uneasiness. Then came the crunching, little crunches, disjointed rustling, and suddenly, a needle. Sticks. Thurin's skin. A tiny sting. It seemed insignificant. The second, the third, the fifth, then the world turned upside down. The earth exploded, like a whirlpool. Thousands of small bodies shot up, small, angry, deadly bodies. Africa's worst nightmare. War bees. The sky darkened, the sun disappeared, the air trembled with the violence of their wing beats. Thurin tried to stand up, his legs trembled. His eyes widened, his instincts told him to run, but the old bones did not rebel. He begged. The lion tried to take a step or two. But thousands of needles pierced his skin, his eyes, his mane, his claws. Each needle was another scream, another defeat. He fell to the ground. The proud king of the savannah was kneeling before an unseen army. He did not roar. He did not fight. He only moaned, and the savannah swallowed his groan in silence. No hunters came. No friendly scent was carried on the wind, only the howling and pain. There, in the middle of Tanzania, a one-time king was vanishing in plain sight, and no one knew, no one saw, no one heard, until a shadow appeared on the horizon. A vehicle drove through the dust clouds, shaking. He was inside the vehicle. Orwin Vale. He was not young, but the fire of youth was not extinguished in his heart. His eyes were used to unraveling the secrets of the savannah. He read every speck of dust, every movement of a leaf, and that day, a bad feeling settled in his heart like a heavy stone. It accelerated. He came closer. First, he thought. The shadow in the distance was a shadow, maybe a bush, maybe a stone, but his eyes saw the truth, a giant body lying on the ground, its back bulging. A mass floating above him like a black blanket. A swarm of bees. Orwin's hands tightened on the steering wheel. His heart wasn't beating in his chest, it was screaming. A lion. A king, and in the middle of death. Orwin stopped the vehicle, the engine grunted to a halt. The silence returned, but this time the silence smelled of death. There was poison in the air. The howling pierced the eardrums and froze the blood. With each sigh, a painful oath was heard. Don't come near. You will die. Orwin hesitated for a moment. He knew what bees were capable of. He had once witnessed an elephant killed within hours by a swarm of bees. For a lion, a few minutes would be enough. But then, the old wooden staff inside the vehicle caught his eye. A heirloom, a gift from the Maasai tribe. A reminder against fear. Fear is not the voice of nature. It is the echo of the human heart. Orwin reached out his hand. He took the incense burner. He flicked the lighter. A plume of smoke rose, light and fragrant. He opened the door, and he stepped into the center of hell, into his death. As soon as Orwin's feet touched the ground, the heat hit him like a slap. The sound of the car door mingled with the deathly silence of the savannah, each breath filling his lungs like a weight. But this heat was more than the usual scorching intensity of the sun. There was the smell of death in the air, scorched earth, sweat, blood, and fear. Orwin took his first step, gripping the incense burner tightly in both hands. The smoke rose in delicate rings, then dissipated in the choking air. With each step the humming grew sharper. It was as if he was walking into the heart of an unseen army, and that army was waiting. His first steps, the bees could only watch from a distance. But after a few meters, the change began. Suddenly he felt a rustling, a vibration, as if a hot knife had been dipped into cold water. For a moment, he thought the ground was shaking, then he noticed this strange density in the air. Tiny, deadly bodies were hurtling towards him. Orwin grimaced that he began waving the incense in wide circles. The smoke tried to build invisible walls around the bees. But it wasn't always enough. The first sting came that it stung in the thinnest part of her skin. Just below her neck that a thin scream lodged in her throat, but she swallowed that he didn't step back. The old lion was now trying to get up, but every movement was lost in pain. That it was as if he was nailed to the ground with invisible chains. His mane was covered in blood and poison. His eyes were already beginning to close. Orwin's instinct screamed to run, survive. But deep in his heart there was another voice. A thin, but unshakable voice that he is alone. You are not so heartless as to leave a living creature to die, it said, and he flinched. The second bee sting came, this time on his wrist. Orwin's fingers twitched involuntarily. For a moment the incense burner seemed to slip from his hand, but he didn't let go. He squeezed it. He walked forward, step by step, as if it were not his life. The bees were everywhere now. In her hair, on her neck, on her wrists. Some continued to attack despite the incense. Orwin could now feel the faint burn of the poison with every breath, but he did not turn back. As he approached Thurin, the sight brought him to his knees. He wanted to fall to the ground, to cry, to pray, but there was no time. Thurin's chest was barely rising and falling. Every breath sounded like a dry wheeze. His face was swollen like a cloth pierced with thorns. His golden eyes were almost invisible, but still, she felt Orwin's arrival. Two breaths, two hearts, two worlds met in that moment in a line. A man and a lion, both on the border, both alone, both in need of a miracle. Orwin placed the incense burner on Thurin's bedside, then he knelt. He raised his hands, remembering the ritual he had learned from the Maasai elders. He began to swirl the smoke in circles. Every movement, every turn, was a silent pact with nature. Let it live. Bees began to swarm around the incense. First just a few, then in groups. The humming diminished like a death march. But this battle was not yet won. Orwin could feel the sweat running down his forehead. It seeped into his eyes, blurring his vision. Mixed sweat and blood dripped down his cheeks. His hands were shaking, but he didn't stop moving. And then, suddenly, there was a new sound in the air, the sound of an engine. In the distance, another shadow appeared, the veterinary team. Orwin felt a moment of relief, but he quickly pulled himself together. It wasn't over yet. Thurin's heart was still a fragile candle flame. The smallest gust of wind, the smallest mistake, could extinguish it. The veterinary vehicles were approaching fast. Orwin tried to disperse the bees as much as possible with incense. All the while he spoke softly to Thurin. His words may have lost their meaning, but his tone was a promise. This will not be the end of you. As the bees dispersed, Thurin slowly turned his head, and for a moment, just a moment, his gaze met Orwin's. Orwin's heart skipped a beat, because in those eyes, there was no longer the pride of a king. But the plea of a creature. Don't leave me. Veterinarians jumped out of the vehicles. Needles, IVs, panicked orders, but Orwin didn't really hear anything at that moment. The world seemed to slow down. He heard only Thurin's labored breathing, and his own heartbeat. The incense was now almost extinguished. Orwin stood on his knees with the last rings of smoke, tired but upright. This mission was not yet complete. That moment, a bee gathered its last strength and stung Orwin's cheek. He felt a sharp burn on his face. His eyes teared up, his knees trembled. But he didn't move. He just waited by Thurin. Like a protector, a guardian, a brother, and the savannah, he watched all this in silence. As if nature was whispering to itself, some battles are fought in silence, some victories are won alone. That day, the sun never shone fully, and there was no storm, but one man answered the silent cry of a lion, and from then on, neither of them would ever be the same again. In that moment, time stood still in the middle of the savannah. Thurin's pale body was lifted by the quick but gentle hands of the veterinarians. Orwin was still on his knees, his head spinning, his body aching. He could hardly open his eyes, but he did not look away for a moment. All the humming, all the voices seemed to fade away. In that moment, there was only one thing, Thurin's heart, still beating, though weakly. The lion was placed on a specially prepared stretcher, his furry body blistered from bee stings, his eyes almost completely closed, but his chest still rose and fell slightly. Life still shone in that body, like a faint but persistent spark. When the vets loaded him into the vehicle, the sky above the savannah seemed to breathe heavily. The wind blew gently for the first time in a long time, and Orwin put down the incense burner and bowed his head. had he succeeded, he didn't know that at that moment. All he knew was that his heart was still beating like crazy. As the vehicle sped away, Orwin was left alone. His exhaustion, combined with the heat, brought him to his knees. The earth was hot and hard. But beneath that warmth were traces of life, of pain, of struggle, and Orwin, he swore on that land, no matter what happens, Thurin will come back to life. Days, weeks passed, the golden color of the savannah faded slowly between day and night, and then one day, one morning, the news of salvation came. Thurin was back on his feet. At first he was weak, his steps were shaky, his eyes were still not fully open, but his spirit was stronger than his body. With each step, he dug another victory into the earth. And finally, the gates opened. That he was released, the savannah welcomed him in. Silence, the birds, the wind, the earth, they all witnessed his return. Thurin stepped out onto the wide plain with heavy steps. His eyes no longer held age, but wisdom. His body was full of scars, but they were signs that a king did not run away from battle. Orwin watched from a distance, next to a cart, hands in his pockets, a slight smile on his face. His eyes followed the old king step by step. And then Thurin took a few steps and stopped. That he turned his head slightly. An invisible bond was formed between them. Two warriors. Two lonely souls. Thurin looked at Orwin. There was no thanks in that look. No gratitude, because lions don't feel gratitude, they only remember, and that look was worth 1,000 words. Then he turned his head. And walked slowly into the endlessness of the savannah. But just as he was about to disappear into the embrace of the savannah, he turned once more. One last time. This time his gaze was different. As if to say, you and I are now part of the same story. And then, he disappeared. I in the grass, in the whisper of the wind, in infinity. Orwin stood still for a while, then he took a deep breath. He raised his head. The sky was brighter now. It was as if nature was confirming what had happened. That day, a life was saved, but it wasn't just a lion that was saved. Two souls, two lives, were reborn in a single moment, and some wounds, never visible to the eye, but they are carried forever. Like the scars left on Thurin's body, the scars on Orwin's heart were now part of him, because some battles are invisible, some heroism is silent, and some moments echo forever. Unforgettable. And now I ask you, if you were the one standing alone in the middle of that savannah, what would you do? Would you run away? Or would you risk everything for the sanctity of life? Don't forget to share your thoughts with us in the comments. If this story moved you, please like, subscribe to our channel and help us share this unique journey with more people, because here, every story tells a life, every life tells a story. And your support makes these stories grow even more. Thank you.